Our view is we want peace here. We've been actively pursuing peace from the very beginning of the administration. But the Russians have got to wake up and accept reality here. A lot of people are dying. They don't have a lot to show for it. How many more people are they willing to lose? How many more people are they willing to kill? For very little, if any, gain in the military advantage on the ground there, I think the answer is hopefully not that much. Certainly, our attitude here is we're going to keep on working for peace. And we hope the Russians actually wake up to the reality on the ground. Wake up to the reality on the ground.
Did you just see? Was a direct message, the kind that leaves no room for interpretation. It wasn't just anyone, it was G.D. Vance, Vice President of the United States, looking directly at Moscow on September 28th, the final day. Now, think a little bit about what he just said. Russians need to wake up and accept the reality. A lot of people are dying and they don't have a lot to show. They're heavy words coming directly from the United States. But do you want to know what's even more impressive? Americans aren't the only ones who think that way. Russians are also, contrary to what many think. I'm talking about ordinary Russians. They're not people on the streets or hidden opponents. They're important people, very important people. People directly connected to the Russian government. People who have always defended Putin. People who, until a few days ago, wouldn't have dared to say what they're saying now. But in the last 10 days, they started talking. After you hear what these people said, you'll understand how deep the hole is that Russia has gotten itself into. You'll see the frightening numbers they're seeing, and maybe completely change your mind about who's really winning this war. Let's start with who these people are. The first one is Tatiana Montian. She's not just any person. Montian works as a professional propagandist. She's paid to defend the Kremlin Russian government. Her job is literally to repeat what Putin wants the Russian people to believe. For years, that's what she did. She convinced people that the war was going well, that victory was coming. But 22nd, changed, gave an interview, and all the rules. Montian said that a second mobilization is coming. And do you want to know what that means? That the Russian government is forcing people to become soldiers. Russia has already done this once in 2022, and it was a disaster. The families were furious, there were protests, and they almost overthrew Putin. So when Montian talks about a second mobilization, she's talking about something that can politically threaten Putin. But there's who. She added that a second mobilization will only be avoided if Russia achieves a major military breakthrough. Then came the most brutal part. She said this breakthrough seems unlikely. That's because, in September, the Russian offensive slowed down a lot. And even worse, she said that Russia may have used its last reserves of soldiers. Think for a moment about the weight of these statements. After all, a Kremlin propagandist doesn't talk about last reserves for nothing. She is clearly preparing the Russian people. She is saying, without saying it, that terrible news is coming. Because if the reserves are gone, Putin only has two options. Either he stops his special operation, or he mobilizes again. And, as you can imagine, either of those options is a political nightmare for him. But Montian is not alone. The day before, September 21st, another important name spoke. Dmitry Rogozin. This man has an impressive resume. He was Deputy Prime Minister of Russia, headed the Russian space program, and today he is a Russian senator in the occupied region of Zaporizhia. For years, Rogozin boasted about Russia's technological superiority. He said that Russia had the best weapons, the best equipment. But now he is admitting the truth. In an interview, Rogozin said that on the Russian side, there's only Russia. But on the Ukrainian side, there are high-tech countries helping. And then he was even more direct and brutal. He described what is happening on the battlefield. Groups of 3 to 4 middle-aged Russian men, loaded with heavy armor, trying to cross minefields. While swarms of Ukrainian drones hunt them from the sky, Rogozin admitted that Ukraine has 10 times more drones than Russia. 10 times. That's not a small difference, it's a technological abyss. And then he said a phrase that sums it all up. The map is moving with great difficulty, at a colossal price paid by our troops. Colossal price. Colossal. Those are the words of a man who spent decades building the Russian military machine, and now he's watching that machine be destroyed. But perhaps the most shocking admission came from Pavel Gubarev. Gubarev is not an outside commentator. He is one of the founders of the 2014 separatist movement. He was the so-called People's Governor of Donetsk. He truly believes in it. He defends this war with all his strength. He wants Russia to win. But after hearing what Rogozin said, Gubarev went on Telegram and wrote something devastating. He said that Russian propaganda keeps deceiving the public, saying that Ukraine is almost defeated, saying that victory is near. But Gubarev told the truth. The situation is a stalemate and, in fact, constitutes defeat. It constitutes defeat. Those are strong words. A major war supporter now claims Russia has already lost, but he didn't stop there. Gubarev went even further. He said winning is impossible while Russia's colonial system of power remains. And do you know what that means? He's making a call to overthrow the government. Gubarev isn't asking for peace. He's saying that Putin and his system are the problem, that they need to be removed. And when your own supporters start calling for a revolution, you know something has gone wrong. Very wrong. But wait, there's more. Because maybe the most shocking moment of all came from Russian state television itself. On September 19th, a live show called Meeting Place was on the air. It's a political show on the NTV channel, which is government-controlled, and on this show, a guest did the unthinkable. He used basic logic to destroy the Kremlin's propaganda. And all of this live on state television. Now, consider this. The Russian Ministry of Defense had been saying that Ukraine lost between 1.7 million and 2 million soldiers. Absurdly large numbers. The guest on the show explained why these numbers are impossible. He said, the Ukrainian army started with 800,000 soldiers and has been adding between 100,000 and 120,000 per year. Then, he concluded, there can't be 2 million losses, because if there were, the Ukrainian army simply wouldn't exist anymore. The host was cornered. He had to ask, are you saying the Ministry of Defense is lying? And the answer, live on state television, was devastating. Not just ours. It's a big mistake to underestimate the Ukrainian army. Do you know what's even more incredible? That wasn't censored. It was broadcast as usual. And that means either the Kremlin's control over the media is failing, or someone inside the system wanted that truth to be heard. So, what is the truth that these people can no longer hide? Well, it's the numbers, and the numbers are brutal. In the summer offensive of 2025, Russia captured 1,548 square kilometers. It sounds like a lot, but it's not. That represents 0.256% of Ukraine, less than 0.25%. And do you know at what cost they achieved this? 210,000 Russian soldiers killed or wounded just during this period. But let's look at the bigger picture. In 2024, Russia gained 4,168 square kilometers. The cost was 427,000 soldiers. Now, add the 2 years together, from January 2024 to August 2025. Russia sacrificed 637,000 soldiers, all that to conquer less than 1% of Ukraine. Let's put that into perspective. Russia is losing 111 soldiers for every square kilometer conquered. At this rate of losses, Russia would lose 168,000 soldiers just to conquer an area the size of São Paulo. This isn't a war of attrition that Russia is winning. It's a war that's consuming Russia itself. So, when we say that Russia has already lost, we're not saying that the Russian army will collapse tomorrow. We're talking about a strategic defeat. A strategic defeat happens when three things come together. First, you fail to achieve your objectives. Second, the cost becomes unsustainable. Third, there is no viable path to victory. Remember when Putin claimed he would capture Kiev in a few days? What happened with that? It's been almost 4 years. Putin said that Ukraine would surrender. Ukraine is attacking Russian territory. Putin said the West would abandon Ukraine. Support has only grown. The operation, meant to last days, is killing over 1,000 Russian soldiers daily. And there's more. If you still have doubts about the Russian desperation, just look at what happened. On September 30th, the Russian Ministry of Defense published a map on Telegram. The map showed the territorial gains for 2025. There was just one problem. The map was at least 50 years old. The city of Sivers, which was marked as Yama, but Sivers hasn't been called Yama since 1973. 52 years ago. There were other errors as well, including names of cities Russia left decades ago. This raises two possibilities, and both are alarming. First possibility. The Ministry of Defense is so desperate to show progress that it's using old Soviet maps to fabricate territorial gains. Second possibility. The Russian military machine is so degraded that it's literally using 50-year-old maps to plan operations in 2025. Either way, it's a sign of a system that's collapsing from within. But it's not just on the battlefield that Russia is losing. Ukraine has discovered Russia's Achilles heel, oil. Do you remember Gubarev, whom I mentioned earlier? He mentioned that 26% of Russia's refining capacity was damaged or destroyed. But all signs suggest reality could be worse. Sources inside Russia suggest that 38% of the capacity is paralyzed, and 2/3 of that is because of Ukrainian attacks. You can see the result on the streets. Fuel shortages in 33 out of 83 Russian regions. Lines at gas stations. 1 million tons less gasoline produced just in September. Ukraine is using its cheap drones to attack Russian refineries, and it's working. Each attack takes oil dollars away from Russia, money that Putin needs to fund the war. And the economic consequences are devastating. The world's largest financial institutions have already delivered their verdict. The International Monetary Fund predicts that the Russian economy will grow by only 0.9% in 2025. Compare that with the previous numbers in 2024. Russia claimed a growth of 4.1%, but that growth was artificial, inflated by military spending. In comparison, the United States will grow by 3.9%. The global average will be 3%, and Russia, 0.9%. The World Bank has the same forecast. Russia is entering long-term economic stagnation, not just because of the sanctions, but because it turned its economy into a war machine. A machine that devours all and creates nothing lasting. This leads to the dilemma destroying Putin. Russia is recruiting 35,000 soldiers per month, but it's losing more than that. The reservoir, well, it's drying up. Montian has already warned, a second mobilization is coming. But here's the big problem. Putin can't do a second mobilization. He's stuck in an impossible dilemma. If he doesn't mobilize the Russian army, he'll eventually run out of soldiers. The losses keep coming, the gains stop, and he loses the war militarily. If he mobilizes, he brings the war into every Russian home. It shatters the illusion that this is a special, distant operation and risks uprisings that could overthrow his regime. The last mobilization didn't go well for the Russian government. Protests by wives and mothers became a political threat to Putin himself. Russian polls also show that 58% of Russians oppose a second mobilization. And there's a fascinating fact. More than 50% of Russians want peace negotiations, but they still support the troops. That's what analysts call a tired patriot. People convinced by propaganda that the war is necessary are exhausted and want it to end. Putin can maintain this path, a fragile consensus, only as long as the war is something that happens far away. On television, a mass mobilization would destroy that illusion. It's not only the Russians noticing this, the United States is as well. Keith Kellogg is the special envoy of the President of the United States to Ukraine. This is the guy who has access to all American intelligence about the war. He knows exactly what's happening behind the scenes. On September 30th, speaking at the Warsaw Security Forum, he said something direct. I think that, deep down, Putin realizes that he's not going to win. It's a losing fight for him in the long run. It's not going to happen.
We've reached the point where we say we know where the Ukrainians are, we're in a good position with the Ukrainians, and Putin doesn't want to go there. And I think part of that is the fact that I think, probably in his heart, I think he realizes he's not going to win. He can't win this in the long run. What does he want to do? He wants to replace Ukraine. That's not going to happen. He wants to change the government. That's not going to happen.
As you can see, Kellogg is not speculating. He's not giving a personal opinion. He's saying, based on everything that American intelligence knows, that Putin already understands he's lost. Each Ukrainian attack on refineries takes money away from Russia. With each passing day, Russia loses more soldiers. Every month, the economy deteriorates. The war that Putin started to restore Russia's imperial glory is ensuring that there will be far fewer Russians to live in that empire. So, do you know what all this means? It means that the lie has become too big to hide. It means that even the people paid to lie can no longer do it convincingly. It means that reality has finally broken through the wall of propaganda. Russia didn't lose because its army was obliterated. Russia lost because it failed to achieve any strategic objective. It's bleeding soldiers at an unsustainable rate. It's destroying its own long-term economy. It's mortgaging its demographic future. And it has no viable way to reverse any of this. As I said before, this is a strategic defeat. And when even its own propagandists start to admit this, you know the game is over. The only question that remains is how long Putin will keep up this farce before Russia finally accepts reality. And you, what do you think? Did these admissions, coming from within Russia itself, surprise you? Leave your opinion in the comments below. If this video made you see this war in a different way, share it with someone and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next analyses. See you next time.